have you, and were you always interested in the arts when you were growing up?
Well, I went to a convent school, and of course, they primarily music was very important there. And I played the piano and I sang, and I entered Kent Festival, which used to go and won a few prizes. And then I joined Shen Bay Opera Society when I was 16, and I left not that many years ago. So yes, I've always been interested in music and loved music and singing.
Did you, at an early stage, think you might have a career in the arts?
No, I don't think so. Did some training at the Guildhall. I had some lessons at the Guildhall, and then with some opera singer. But no, only really as an amateur. I really loved the sort of the whole amateur thing. You know, it was really, I loved it. I became chairman of the Opera Society. I was secretary for 20 years. So it was very much in my blood, and I loved it.
What do you think you learned from being part of the Shen Bay Operatic Society?
Well, that's a difficult question. Well, I think it was, what did one learn? Obviously, to communicate with lots of different people, how to cope with people's ego, and how to make decisions, because obviously things always went wrong. As you even in, you know, things went wrong, silly things went wrong. So I think it made me more decisive about what to do about things when I was in a position of power.
Do you think you also learned something about the value of community, of the diversity of people within a community coming together for a single purpose?
Oh yes, very much so. I think that that's probably what's related to most of my future life in a way. Yes, and I think I'm quite a good communicator. So I'd always see if something was wrong. I'm quite good at sort of reacting to things that go wrong. So I think it probably was. And also, it was a big community thing. I mean, Shen Bay Operatic Society was very much part of the community in Shen Bay.
Now, how did you make the leap from all of this to becoming really one of Kent's leading arts administrators?
Very kind. Well, very late in life. I mean, I don't actually. I didn't actually. I worked in London as a secretary for years, or a PA, and then I did a lot of marketing with various people. And then I sort of was married and didn't do much work, or just the odd job here and there. And then my late life, really, I remember going to some do with a friend of mine, and it was so poorly run. And I said to her, "Golly, I'm sure we could do better than this." And so we set up a little firm called Elite Events. And she was Steffi Morelli, and Morelli's the coffee shops. And so we were able to have a lovely launch at her coffee shops, and we invited lots of people. And because I'd done a lot of charity fundraising, we had lots of people come along, and it was nice. And from there, I sort of somehow, I don't know how, got invited to help with Sounds New Contemporary Music Festival, to do some PR for them. And that's where I met Paul. And so from there, I started, you know, I was invited to deal, to actually run the Friends group. Actually, that's what to start with, bits of this and bits of that. And that was sort of 17 years ago. And I've sort of climbed up the ladder, and eventually here I am.
When you began working with Sounds, as you, of course, were in a world where there were very few opportunities to actually learn how to be an arts administrator. So where did you learn the basic skills? I mean, now there are university degrees, there are postgraduate qualifications, there are the claw schemes, there are a whole range of support schemes for would-be administrators. You had none of this. You were out on a raft, you know, and off you went.
Yes, I think one of the because I was a PA and a secretary, I was a touch typist. I'd organised men all my life. Sounds awful, but you know, I'd been in positions of with managing directors, people like this. So I knew that how to organise the logistics of things. And then I'd worked for a company called Homegrown Fruits in Canterbury, which was sort of where all the farmers got together and sold all their fruit, tomatoes and Spencers. And I was PA to the managing director there, but he left, and somehow or other, I don't know how, I got the job of running the marketing. And I used to have to go around the country and set up events with Percy Thrower. Do you know Percy Thrower? The gardener. And so I used to have to go to these places, get all these people to come along, and it became second nature to me. I don't know why, but I just loved it. And so I've learned everything on the hoof, really.
I mean, what is extraordinary is what you combine in your professional portfolio. Event management, which we've just been talking about, marketing, but also public relations and fundraising. Very few people, in my experience, combine all four skills.
Right. Well, of course, and it started when I joined the Samaritans when I was, well, a long time ago, really. I was only in my late 20s, early 30s. I joined the Samaritans, and eventually I became the director. And it was quite obvious, we were in a little building in Ivy Lane in Canterbury. It was quite obvious that we needed to expand. So I decided so I went to the Receiver General at the cathedral and said to him, would you chair a sort of fundraising thing? And as it so happened, he'd been a Samaritan, so it was just very lucky. So he came along, and we invited all the great and good in Canterbury to come along and to join this panel. And then we invited a professional fundraiser. And I won't mention the names, he's quite well known, his wife's very well known. And he came along and he spent a day with us. Now, this was I suppose a long time ago, 40 years ago, maybe more. He came along and he charged £150 for the day to talk to us about fundraising. Well, this happened twice. And then David Macy said to me, well, you can do that. He said, listen, we're not paying £150 a day. So he just handed the job to me. And then I suddenly was the fundraiser. And I don't know, I took to it like a duck to water. I went on courses for the Institute of Fundraising. I worked very kindly. Some people who I'd worked for gave me lovely references, so they accepted me. I went on the courses, and that's it, really. And I absolutely, I actually enjoy fundraising.
You've said wonderfully, I don't find it difficult to ask for money. Most of us find it extremely difficult to ask other people money. Why don't you find it so difficult?
Well, because it's not for me, is it? If I always say, if I work for a charity, and I've done a lot of fundraising. I've helped the Samaritans, I've helped Relate, marriage guidance. I've helped the Sirenes, which was the homeless. I've done a lot of fundraising in my time, and I'm now working with Lily's Bistro, which is a fantastic project. And I always think I'm not asking. It's not for me. I don't need them. I don't want the money, but I'm asking for other people, and so I can see what good it would do for those people, how wonderful it would be. So I have no difficulty in asking for money. A lot of my friends cross the road when they say, well, used to, when I was doing major fundraising, people used to cross the road when they saw me coming. Because they knew that, oh, don't talk to Willie, she'll only want money. But,
Presumably the key element is how to ask the question, because professional fundraisers tend either to be, in my experience, somewhat oleaginous. They kind of stroke your hand metaphorically, or they play on your guilt. But that's clearly not the way you do it. So how do you make the approach?
Well, I would say to people, when people ask me, if I'd like to fundraise for them or help them and approach people, I would say to them, the first thing you must do is you must become married to the project. So you must know the people who are working on the project, the beneficiaries. You must know everything about it so that you're never caught out. And then you're in the position of going to people and actually explaining it to them and making them feel that whatever they're doing is going to do some good. An example, I'll just give you an example. When I started with Lily's Bistro, which have only been going about 2 years, and have done quite a bit of fundraising, they were offered some funding, but only it had to be match funded. Now, I knew somebody who's very philanthropic, who I'd grown up with, and I went and I wrote to him and I said, look, this is this. I said, will you come to the bistro? Will you come and have coffee with us? So he came, he sat down with us, and he put his hand in his pocket, and we got match funding for both the projects, which is something like £5,000. So I think it's being yourself and putting yourself in that position of how you're going to help those people, and just being nice to people and communicating with them. There's nothing, I think there's anything very magical about it.
Willie, as you describe that process, I wonder to myself whether all the skills that you had naturally, but which were honed at the Shen Bay Opera Society, when you're stepping into a character, becoming somebody, learning how to empathize, not only with yourself and your character, but the others around, whether all that has played an essential part in what you've developed as your professional life.
Well, I suppose, I mean, I think I probably am quite an extrovert. I'm certainly not an introvert. I mean, I can talk to everybody, and I suppose that is part of the fact of being, I suppose you're right. I sort of get into the character, you get into the character of that charity. This is what I'm doing, you know, this is the character I am. And today I'm Deal Festival, tomorrow I might be Lily's Bistro, but it's the same mindset.
How did you come to Deal Music and Arts? You came initially to help them with fundraising. How did that all develop?
No, that was through Paul, meeting Paul, and somehow through Sounds New, and Paul just saying to me, would you like to do, I think I came to do a bit of PR, I came to do a bit of press work, because I'd done a course on journalism, and I did that, and I think I just worked on an hourly rate for a while, and then things progressed, and then I got invited to do a bit more and a bit more and a bit more, and that's it, and then it ended up in this role.
Well, did you from the very beginning think there was something special about Deal Music and Arts?
That's a very difficult question. I can't remember, such a long time ago. I think I liked all the people. And suddenly, because I had nothing, although I'd been in musical theatre, I don't know that I'd had an awful lot to do with classical music, if I'm perfectly honest. I've been, my partner, who I was with for 22 years, and which we've now separated from, he was a jazz musician. I mean, as well as an insurance broker, but he was a jazz musician. So I'd grown up with jazz. We've been to every jazz club. He played the double bass. So I was, you know, jazz was very much part of my upbringing, part of my being, but classical music wasn't. And suddenly I was in a position to be thrown in with all this classical music, and I just loved it. I just thought it was absolutely wonderful, and meeting all these people was just great. And so I've never looked back, really. I've loved every minute of it.
To what extent was the enormous educational part of Deal Music and Arts important to you as well?
Oh, well, I think that is absolutely vital. When you go, I mean, we've just seen it's so wonderful to see all those young people on a stage playing an instrument and just loving every minute of it. I think what we do in Deal on the education side is absolutely brilliant. And it's so sad that at the moment we can't do it, but we will be able to. It's absolutely so important, and to see the faces and see the parents when you go to the Nye Hall to see one of the Bold As concert, and you see all those parents come in. You know, they don't go to live concerts like that. They come in and their faces are just so joyous, and when they come out and to see their children, it is so fabulous.
Do you think that the educational work that we do is more important perhaps than the offering of festival events of classical music, jazz, theatre and so forth? In other words, what we're doing is providing something that is essential to the well-being of the community.
Oh, I think they're both important, Christopher. I think it's really important. I think that the Deal Festival gives the community some sort of pride, because it is a wonderful festival. I mean, we have the most amazing people. If you sat in the church and watched Stephen Nisselis play, and you could sort of touch him, you know, it's amazing. And I think people really, really benefit from that and really love it. And I think we've made the Deal Festival into something which is a very friendly organisation. It's not something that people come to a concert to be scared of going. We've made it, I think, because all the people who work with Deal Festival are just such lovely people, and they all have the same sort of ethos, really. So that's great. But the education also, I think the two link so well together, because we do integrate the education into the festival with our community stage, which we're going to do more of. So I think they're both hugely beneficial. I mean, when we do things like the in Deal Castle, where we took the dancers from Goodwin Academy and gave them the opportunity to dance with these lovely musicians. I mean, it's unbelievable. You cannot buy that sort of experience. It's just amazing.
Looking back over your time at DMA, to date, which we hope will continue for a long time. What for you remain perhaps one or two of the things that you're really proud of having midwifed?
I think one of the things that I will never forget is, and in fact, I've asked for the piece of music to be played at my funeral, and I shall never forget it. It was after the Deal Marine bombing. We did a education piece, and we asked some students to do a film, and they did the film, and they filmed all the names of the people who died. And we had, I think it was, it was one of the brass bands, and I can't what. Anyway, we had the concert at St George's Church, and they played Nimrod. Well, I don't think there was one person in that church who wasn't crying. In fact, I'm crying now because it was the most amazing thing, and it's something that I shall never forget. It was just unbelievable. So that was one of the highlights. That was a real highlight for me. What other highlights? Well, I just think every year there is something great. I think the Deal Castle was a highlight. Lots of things, nothing, every year there's something really brilliant. But that was the one thing that has stuck in my mind, because I thought that was all part of the community. It was so brilliant. Grindthorpe Colliery Band.
Willie, we're talking, and you're sitting up in your office at the top of your house.
Yeah.
And I'm conscious of the fact that you work on your own. And you spend large amounts of time, and even more in these dark days of COVID, on your own, working alone. Is that something that you find easy? Do you ever miss the sense of an office culture, a support of people all around you who are all part of a festival team?
No, not really. I'd be terrible, Christopher, because I'd be chatting to everybody all day. I'm much better working on my own. And people ring me up. I chat to people. I go out for a walk. It's not been. I mean, it would be lovely to be able to get into a car. It'd be lovely to go and see people. It'd be lovely to have a board meeting where you could actually see people. But we have to do it, and we've got to do it, because it's what matters at the moment. So I'm very happy. I don't mind working on my own at all. I talk to myself, so it's fine.
What kind of things do you say, Willie?
I don't know. I just say good morning to the office when I get in here, and I say, well, it's a bit untidy in here today. Tidy it up, and I was here last night because I have to say, one of my best friends in all the world, Michelle Castelletti, one of her pieces was played at the Barbican. Well, her arrangement of Mahler's 10th was played last night at the Barbican. So I was so proud, and I was sitting up here watching it last night on my computer. So that was really brilliant.
If I see a threaded theme through all that you've done, it is an absolute belief and commitment to the idea of community. Is that right?
Yes, it is. It must be. I mean, you wouldn't. Everything I've done, all the charities I've worked for, have all been part of the community. If you ask me why I did it, I have no idea. I suppose it's a sense of moral. I don't know, but I suppose that is, yes. I really believe that.
Were you brought up to believe in the idea of community?
Not really. My parents, I was adopted. It was quite interesting, really, because in those days you didn't, they didn't match people. So I was adopted by two lovely people. My parents were both 5 foot, and I was 5'7". So that was quite interesting. They were lovely people, but very, very Welsh, very antisocial, really. And so, we didn't go, but they weren't wealthy or anything. And they gave me a wonderful love. I can't say they gave me a private education. We never went on holiday because everything was spent on making sure I was fine, which was really wonderful. But they were not socialites. And, so it was when I suddenly came out into the world, and suddenly I saw this great world, and that's it. And I just, I had to embrace it.
That world, for the great part of your life, has been Kent entirely. Were you ever tempted, as it were, to look to a broader part of the country, to a wider canvas beyond Kent? Or do you feel that Kent is who you are and what you want to be?
No, I love it here. I mean, I lived in Shen Bay from the age of 4 till a lot. I shouldn't say how long, but a long time. And I moved to Canterbury only about 12, 13 years ago. But I I love Canterbury. I really love it. But I loved Herne Bay as well. But it's very cold in Herne Bay because it's on the sea.
Willie Cooper, thank you very much indeed.
Oh, thank you, Christopher. Thank you very much.